The prison alarm siren shattered the morning silence of the Pennsylvania State Correctional Facility at 6:47 a.m. on Tuesday, October 15th. Thomas Craig, inmate number 47291, disappeared from his cell during the morning head count. His neatly folded prison uniform lay on his bunk, and a hole the size of a human body gaped in the wall, the result of months of patient work with homemade tools. Prison warden Robert Henderson stood in the empty cell, studying the escape with professional interest and poorly concealed irritation. Craig was due to be released in 3 weeks after serving a full 8-year sentence for assault. Why risk additional years in prison for 3 weeks of freedom? "He's been planning this for months," said guard James Parker, pointing to the evidence. "He used a metal spoon and a piece of rebar. He worked only at night, covering the hole with toothpaste and food scraps." Henderson nodded. In his 30 years in the correctional system, he had seen many escape attempts, but rarely one so well planned and patient. Craig was not an impulsive criminal. That made him much more dangerous. 2 hours away from the prison, at the Maplewood Police Department, Detective Sarah Coleman was finishing her 3rd cup of coffee when the phone rang. At 45, she was one of the most experienced investigators in the county. A woman with a sharp mind and patience, honed by 20 years of working with the darkest sides of human nature. "Detective Coleman, this is Warden Henderson. We have a problem." Sarah sat up straight in her chair. Calls from the prison rarely brought good news. "I'm listening. We had an inmate escape this morning. Thomas Craig, 39 years old, convicted of assaulting an officer. We believe he may be heading toward your city." "Why us?" "His victim was a social worker from Maplewood, Jennifer Morgan. Craig threatened her during the trial. We're faxing you his file." Sarah wrote the name in her notebook. Jennifer Morgan. She knew that woman. Everyone in town knew Jenny. She had worked in child protective services for 15 years and was one of those people who truly believed she could make the world a better place. "How serious is the threat?" "Hi. Craig spent 8 years in prison thinking about revenge. Psychological evaluations showed signs of fixation on Morgan. He believes she is responsible for destroying his life." After the conversation, Sarah immediately contacted Sheriff Michael Davis. Davis had served in the Maplewood Police Department for 28 years and knew every resident in the town by sight. He was an old friend of the Morgan family. His wife worked with Jennifer on the church's Family Assistance Committee. "Mike, we need to talk to Jenny," Sarah said as she entered the sheriff's office. "We have a serious problem." Davis put down his papers and looked intently at the detective. Over the years they had worked together, he had learned to read her expression. "Thomas Craig escaped from prison this morning. Remember the case from 8 years ago?" The sheriff's face darkened. He remembered the case well, one of the most difficult of his career. A social worker beaten half to death by an enraged father right in the courthouse. At that moment, 4 blocks from the police station, Jennifer Morgan sat in her office at the county social services building, reviewing the files of new families. At 42, she had retained the energy and optimism that many of her colleagues had lost over years of dealing with human tragedy. Jennifer was a short woman with chestnut hair that she always wore neatly pulled back in a bun. Her desk was covered with case files, photos of children, and thank you letters from families she had helped reunite. On the wall hung her college diploma and several children's drawings with the words, "Thank you, Miss Jenny." She was working on a report about the Thompson family when there was a knock at the door. Her colleague, Maria Sanchez, a social worker with 5 years' experience, entered. "Jenny, the police are here to see you. Detective Coleman and Sheriff Davis." Jennifer looked up from her papers. Police visits to their office were a regular occurrence. They often worked together on domestic violence and child protection cases, but something in Maria's expression made her wary. "Send them in." Sarah and Mike entered the small office cluttered with papers. Jennifer stood up from her desk, extending her hand to shake theirs. "Sarah, Mike, how are you? What brings you here?" "Jenny, we need to talk," Sheriff Davis said, closing the door behind him. "This is about your safety." Jennifer's expression changed. In her years working in social services, she had received threats from disgruntled parents before, but Mike's tone suggested something more serious. "Please sit down. What's this about?" Sarah took a photo out of her folder, a mug shot from a prison file. A middle-aged man with harsh features and cold eyes stared straight at the camera. Thomas Craig. Do you remember him? Jennifer took the photo and her face paled. Of course she remembered. How could she forget the man who had almost killed her? He escaped from prison this morning, Sarah continued. 3 weeks before his release. The prison administration believes he may be heading here. Jennifer slowly sank into a chair. Memories of that day 8 years ago came flooding back. She remembered the rage in Craig's eyes when the court ruled that his daughter would be taken away. She remembered him screaming that she had destroyed his family. She remembered the pain of the blows and the taste of blood in her mouth. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. "First, we'll arrange security. A patrol car will be on duty at your house around the clock. Second, we advise you to temporarily move in with relatives or friends far away from the city." "What about Ethan?" Jennifer thought of her 16-year-old son. "He's in his senior year of high school and has important exams coming up." "We can arrange security for him too," Davis said. "Jenny, I've known you for many years. You're a strong woman, but this man is dangerous. He spent 8 years plotting his revenge." Jennifer nodded, trying to collect her thoughts. She was used to helping others cope with crises, but now she found herself in the center of one. "Okay, I'll talk to Ethan tonight, but I'm not going to hide for the rest of my life. If Craig wants to find me, he'll find me. He might not even come here," Sarah said, though her voice sounded doubtful. "Maybe he just wanted to get away early. A lot of fugitives try to get as far away as possible." But all three of them knew that was unlikely. A man doesn't plan an escape months in advance with only 3 weeks to go before his release without a serious reason. When the police left, Jennifer was alone in her office. She looked at the photo of Thomas Craig and tried to remember all the details of that old case. 8-year-old Emma Craig, a skinny girl with bruises on her arms and fear in her eyes. A father who drank and took his anger out on his child. A mother who couldn't or wouldn't protect her daughter. Jennifer had done what she thought was right at the time. She had protected the child. But the price of that decision turned out to be higher than she could have imagined. Her thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. The name Ethan appeared on the display. "Mom, are you going to be late today? There's a police car at our house." Jennifer closed her eyes. It had begun. 8 years ago, October was particularly rainy in Maplewood. Jennifer Morgan remembered that day in minute detail, how the rain pounded on the windows of the social services building, how she nervously shuffled through the Craig family's files, preparing for the most difficult decision of her career. Emma Craig was an 8-year-old girl with huge brown eyes and a habit of hiding behind adults. When her teacher first brought her to the school nurse because of bruises on her arms, Emma explained that she had fallen off her bike. But the bruises appeared too often and their location suggested otherwise. Jennifer first met the Craig family at their home on Pine Street, a small, single-story building with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. Thomas Craig worked as a mechanic at a local auto repair shop, and his wife, Linda, cleaned office buildings. The family was barely making ends meet, but that didn't excuse what was happening behind closed doors. "Mr. Craig," Jennifer remembered saying when she first met him, "we've received reports that Emma often comes to school with injuries." Thomas was a tall man with calloused hands and tired eyes. That day he seemed reserved, even friendly. "Emma is an active child," he said. "She's always climbing trees and riding her bike. Kids will be kids." But when Jennifer spoke to Emma alone, the girl told a different story. Her father drank beer after work, a lot of beer. When her mother tried to stop him, he yelled. When Emma was too loud or disobedient, he taught her to be a good girl. Linda Craig was a thin woman with nervous movements and an evasive gaze. She worked the night shift, leaving Emma alone with her father. When Jennifer asked her about her daughter's bruises, Linda repeated her husband's story about childhood mischief. "Thomas is a good father," she insisted. "He just gets tired at work. He has a hard life." But the medical reports told a different story. Dr. Helen Wright, the pediatrician who examined Emma, was categorical in her conclusion. "These injuries are not accidental," she told Jennifer in her office. "The bruises on her shoulders match adult fingerprints. A broken rib that healed incorrectly. A burn on her forearm is shaped like a cigarette." Jennifer knew she had to act. But removing a child from their family was always a last resort, a decision that destroyed lives and rarely led to a happy ending for everyone involved. She spent 3 months working with the Craig family. She arranged anger management counseling for Thomas, helped him find a better-paying job, and provided support for Linda. But the situation only got worse. The final straw came with a call from the hospital in November of that year. Emma had been brought in by ambulance with a concussion and a broken arm. Thomas claimed she had fallen down the stairs, but the doctors were skeptical. "I can't wait any longer," Jennifer told her supervisor, Richard Stone. "This child could die." The decision to remove Emma from her family was made by Judge Margaret Harris at a hearing on December 15th. Jennifer remembered every second of that day. Thomas Craig sat in the courtroom in his only suit, which was clearly too small for him. Next to him sat Linda, quietly crying into a handkerchief. When the judge read the decision, Thomas jumped to his feet. "You can't take my daughter away!" he shouted. "She's all I have!" Court officers tried to calm him down, but Thomas was beside himself with rage. "It's all her fault!" he pointed at Jennifer. "She destroyed my family! She's lying!" After all the officials had left the courtroom, Jennifer lingered, gathering her documents. She didn't notice Thomas Craig returning to the courtroom. The first blow struck her in the back, knocking her to the ground. Thomas leaned over her, raining blows and screaming through his tears. "Give me back my girl! Give me back my family!" Jennifer tried to defend herself, but Thomas was stronger. A blow to the face, another to her ribs. Pain shot through her body and she tasted blood. She was saved by bailiffs who heard her screams and returned to the courtroom. Thomas was restrained and arrested, and Jennifer was taken to the hospital with a concussion, a broken nose, and 3 cracked ribs. Lying in the hospital ward with her face bandaged, she doubted the correctness of her decisions for the first time in her career. Maybe she could have tried other methods. Maybe the family could have been saved without being torn apart. But then she remembered Emma's eyes, the frightened, pain-filled eyes of an 8-year-old girl who was afraid of her own father. Thomas Craig's trial took place 3 months later. He was sentenced to 8 years for assaulting a public official and making threats. Before the sentence was handed down, he was allowed to say a few words. "I loved my daughter," he said, looking directly at Jennifer. "I would never have hurt her. That woman destroyed everything I had. She destroyed my family because of a few bruises." His voice trembled with rage and despair. "I will remember her face every day in prison, and when I get out, I'll find her." Emma was placed with a foster family, kind people from a nearby town who were already raising 2 foster children. Jennifer visited her regularly for the first 2 years until the girl adjusted to her new life. The last time she saw Emma was 3 years ago. The girl had grown into a confident 13-year-old teenager who was doing well in school and dancing. She called her adoptive parents Mom and Dad and seemed to have forgotten her difficult childhood. "Thank you for saving me," Emma told Jennifer at the time. "I know it wasn't easy." Those words helped Jennifer cope with the guilt that had haunted her all these years. Now, sitting in her office and looking at the photo of Thomas Craig, she was once again plagued by the same doubts. Had she done the right thing? Was there an alternative to destroying a family? Linda Craig committed suicide a year after her husband's arrest. Neighbors found her in the same house on Pine Street with an empty bottle of sleeping pills next to her bed. In her suicide note, she wrote that she couldn't live without her family. Jennifer learned about this from Detective Coleman, who investigated the suicide. Linda's death became another burden on the social worker's conscience. That evening, Jennifer sat in her kitchen trying to explain the situation to her son Ethan. At 16, he was a serious and mature teenager who understood the specifics of his mother's work. "Mom, is this man really dangerous?" Ethan asked, pushing away his plate of half-eaten dinner. "I don't know," Jennifer replied honestly. "Maybe. He was very hurt by my decision. But you saved a child, right? That girl?" "Yes, I think so." Ethan nodded. He was proud of his mother's work, although he was worried about her safety. Since childhood, he had known that his mother helped children who were suffering at home, and that not all adults understood this. "The police will protect us," he said with a confidence he didn't feel. A patrol car was on duty outside the window. Officer Jim Rodriguez, a young police officer with 3 years of experience, sat behind the wheel and watched the street closely. It was a quiet part of Maplewood, a neighborhood of single-story houses with neat yards where everyone knew their neighbors. In a Pennsylvania state prison, Warden Henderson studied Thomas Craig's file, trying to understand his motives for escaping. The psychological reports were discouraging. The inmate shows signs of fixation on social worker Jennifer Morgan, wrote prison psychologist Dr. Michael Weiss. Throughout his incarceration, he has blamed her for the destruction of his family and the death of his wife. He has repeatedly expressed a desire to restore justice after his release. Craig was a model prisoner. He didn't get into fights, followed all the rules, and worked in the prison library. But that didn't mean he had changed. On the contrary, his calmness seemed sinister. He was just waiting, Henderson told Detective Coleman on the phone. 8 years waiting for the moment when he could carry out his revenge. Sarah Coleman spent the evening studying the 8-year-old case. She remembered Thomas Craig's arrest, how he resisted, how he screamed about injustice, how he was taken away in handcuffs while continuing to threaten Jennifer. Now she realized she had underestimated the seriousness of those threats. 8 years in prison hadn't extinguished his rage. It had only given it time to become an obsession. Somewhere in the darkness beyond Maplewood, Thomas Craig was moving toward his goal. He had no specific plan, only a burning desire to find the woman who, he believed, had ruined his life. For 8 years, he had thought about this moment, imagining his reunion with Jennifer Morgan and what he would say to her. In his mind, she was the embodiment of the system that had taken everything he held dear. He didn't see a child advocate. He saw a family destroyer. He didn't remember the bruises on his daughter's body. He only remembered her tears as she was taken away from him forever. The first trace of Thomas Craig was found at a gas station 30 miles from the prison, 18 hours after his escape. A surveillance camera captured a man in stolen work clothes buying energy drinks and sandwiches. The cashier, a local college student named Brad Miller, later recalled that the customer seemed nervous and kept looking around. He paid cash and asked for a road map, Brad told Detective Coleman on the phone. He asked how to get to Maplewood without using the main roads. Sarah cursed under her breath. Craig was definitely heading their way, and he was smart enough to avoid the main roads where the police had set up roadblocks. By mid-morning, Craig was halfway to Maplewood. He was traveling on foot along forest trails and country roads, sleeping in abandoned barns and eating whatever he could steal or find. 8 years of prison discipline and physical labor had kept him in good shape, and his rage gave him the strength to keep going despite his exhaustion. During a rest stop in the woods near the town of Pineville, he found an abandoned hunting cabin. Inside, he found canned food, old blankets, and most importantly, topographical maps of the area. Craig studied them by flashlight, planning a route to Maplewood that would allow him to avoid the police. He remembered Jennifer Morgan's address, 247 Maple Avenue. 8 years ago, while preparing for trial, he had driven past her house several times, studying her daily routine. At the time, it was part of his defense plan. He wanted to find dirt on the social worker. Now that knowledge served a different purpose. In Maplewood, the tension was mounting with every passing hour. Detective Coleman had organized patrols of all entrances to the city, and Sheriff Davis was personally overseeing the security of Morgan's home. But the small police station was not prepared for a large-scale operation to search for a dangerous fugitive. "We need state assistance," Davis told Sarah on Thursday morning. "We only have 12 officers, and we can't provide round-the-clock patrols for the entire city." "Help is on the way," Sarah replied, "but until it arrives, we're on our own." Jennifer Morgan tried to lead a normal life, but the constant police presence and her own fears made it almost impossible. She continued to go to work, but her colleagues noticed how she flinched at every unexpected sound and looked around nervously. "Jenny, maybe you should take some time off," Maria Sanchez suggested during lunch break. "The police can handle it without you." "I can't," Jennifer replied, mechanically sorting through documents. "I have too much to do. The Robinsons, the Johnson baby case, the Thompson foster family check." In reality, work was her way of coping with stress. By helping other families, she tried not to think about her own danger. Ethan Morgan reacted to the situation in his own way. Outwardly, he seemed calm, continuing to go to school and see his friends. But his history teacher, Mrs. Patricia Wilson, noticed changes in the usually diligent student's behavior. "Ethan has become distracted," she told Jennifer on the phone. "In class, he's constantly looking out the window as if he's watching something. Maybe you should talk to the school psychologist?" Jennifer knew her son was just as worried as she was. In the evenings, he would find excuses to check the locks on the doors and windows and ask about plans for the weekend, as if trying to make sure they would be safe. "Mom, what if that man really comes?" he asked one evening as they were watching TV. "The police will protect us," Jennifer replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "What if they don't?" Jennifer looked at her son, a tall, thin teenager with her hazel eyes and a serious expression. At 16, he seemed much older than his years. "Then we'll protect ourselves," she said. On Friday evening, another report came in about Craig's whereabouts. A farmer named Jack Stevens had found signs of a break-in at his barn. Canned food, work clothes, and old boots were missing. The barn was only 15 miles from Maplewood. Sarah Coleman arrived at the scene with a forensic expert. The traces were fresh, no more than a day old. On the ground near the barn, they found a boot print that matched Craig's shoe size. "He's close," Sarah told Sheriff Davis over the radio. "Increase security at the Morgan house and warn all officers to be especially vigilant at night." The night from Friday to Saturday was the most tense since the escape. Officer Rodriguez was on duty at the Morgan house, regularly patrolling the perimeter and checking all approaches. Jennifer and Ethan hardly slept, listening to every sound. Around 2 in the morning, Rodriguez noticed movement in the bushes across the street. He immediately called for backup and cautiously approached the suspicious spot. But it turned out to be just a stray cat looking for food in the trash cans. It was a false alarm, but it showed how close everyone was. On Saturday morning, unexpected news arrived. Emma Craig, now a 16-year-old girl, called the Maplewood police station. She had heard about her father's escape on the news and wanted to warn Jennifer. "I remember him," Emma told Detective Coleman on the phone. "I remember his anger. He always said that Miss Morgan destroyed our family. Even when I was little, he kept repeating it." The girl's voice trembled with excitement. "He's dangerous. Very dangerous. When he was angry, he couldn't control himself. Please protect Miss Morgan. She saved my life." This call finally convinced the police of the seriousness of the threat. Sheriff Davis decided to evacuate Jennifer and Ethan to a safe place, but she refused. "I'm not going to hide," she said. "If I start running away from every dissatisfied parent, I won't be able to do my job." "Jenny, this isn't just a disgruntled parent," Davis tried to convince her. "This is a man who has spent 8 years dreaming of revenge. That's exactly why I can't show that I'm afraid. If I give in now, what will happen next time?" Jennifer's stubbornness was both her strength and her weakness. She was willing to defend her principles at any cost, even if it put herself and her son in danger. On Saturday afternoon, Thomas Craig reached the outskirts of Maplewood. He hid in a wooded area on a hill overlooking the town. Through a pair of stolen binoculars, he studied the familiar streets, trying to locate the police stations. He had imagined this moment for 8 years. Maplewood had hardly changed. The same quiet streets, the same houses, the same church in the central square. Only now the town seemed hostile, full of people who had taken his family away from him. Craig took an old photograph out of his pocket, a family snapshot taken shortly before Jennifer Morgan came into their lives. He, Linda, and little Emma were at a picnic by the lake. All three were smiling at the camera, looking happy. "I'll get you justice, baby girl," he whispered, kissing his daughter's photo. In his mind, Emma was forever the 8-year-old girl who had been taken from him. He didn't know that she had grown up, gotten a good education, and found a loving family. In his memory, she was a victim of the system, just like him. As dusk fell, Craig began to make his way down to the city. He had no detailed plan, just an address and a burning desire to meet the woman who had ruined his life. He didn't think about the consequences, about what would happen next. 8 years of rage had reduced his motives to a simple formula: find Jennifer Morgan and make her pay. Officer Rodriguez noticed movement in the alley behind the Morgan house around 9 o'clock in the evening. He immediately turned on his flashlight and headed toward the suspicious location, calling for backup on his radio. "We may have someone here," he reported to the dispatcher. But when he reached the alley, there was no one there. Only footprints in the soft ground, fresh prints from men's boots leading toward Morgan's house. Inside the house, Jennifer and Ethan heard the voices of police officers in the yard. Jennifer looked out the window and saw a flashlight beam sweeping across the bushes. "Mom, is that him?" Ethan asked, approaching his mother. "I don't know," she replied, clutching her phone tighter, "but we're ready." Over the past few days, she had come up with a plan in case Craig did make it to the house. The emergency numbers were written down in a visible place. All the doors and windows were locked, and Ethan's baseball bat was in the bedroom. Not the best weapon, but better than nothing. The search in the alley had been fruitless, but it was clear to everyone that Craig was already in town. Sheriff Davis had doubled the number of patrols and asked the residents of Maplewood to be especially vigilant. "If you see anyone suspicious, call the police immediately," he said on the local radio. "Do not attempt to apprehend him yourselves. This man is extremely dangerous." News that a fugitive prisoner was in town spread quickly among the residents of Maplewood. Many of them knew Jennifer personally and sympathized with her. Some neighbors offered their help, others simply expressed their support. But there were also those who criticized social services, and Jennifer personally for breaking up families. These voices were quieter, but they existed, reminding everyone that public opinion on child protection was divided. Late Saturday night, Thomas Craig made his way to Maple Avenue. He hid in the shadows of the trees, watching the house at number 247. A patrol car was parked directly in front of the entrance, and a police officer periodically got out of the car and walked around the house. Craig studied the situation, trying to find a way to get closer without being seen. He knew he would only have one chance. If the police found him before he was ready, it would all be over. The lights were on in the living room. Silhouettes flashed in the window from time to time. Jennifer and her son were not going to bed, knowing that danger was near. Craig took a pocket knife out of his pocket, the only weapon he had managed to get hold of. The blade wasn't very long, but it was sharp enough. He didn't plan to kill her. He just wanted to talk to the woman who had ruined his life. He wanted her to understand what she had done. But deep down, he knew that the conversation might not end peacefully. 8 years of rage couldn't be vented with words alone. It was midnight when Craig decided to act. He knew that the police officer patrolled the house every half hour. He had enough time to get to the backyard and find a way inside. Waiting for Officer Rodriguez to leave on his next patrol, Craig silently crossed the street. His heart was pounding. For the first time in 8 years, he was this close to his goal. 11:30. Thomas Craig froze in the shadow of an old oak tree, watching Officer Rodriguez disappear around the corner of the Morgan house as he began another perimeter patrol. Craig's heart was beating so loudly that he thought the whole street could hear it. 8 years of waiting had led to this moment. He crossed the street silently, keeping close to the shadows. He knew the backyard well. He had studied it 8 years ago while planning to find dirt on the social worker. Now that knowledge served a different purpose. Craig knew that the back door led straight into the kitchen and that the living room window faced the side of the house. He remembered the layout, a small, one-story house with 3 bedrooms where Jennifer had lived alone with her son since divorcing her husband 5 years ago. After checking the lock on the back door, Craig found that it was locked, but the kitchen window was old, with a worn latch. He took out a folding knife and carefully pried the frame. The wood gave way with a quiet creak. Inside the house, Jennifer sat in the living room trying to read a book. The words blurred before her eyes. She couldn't concentrate on anything but the sounds coming from outside. Every rustle, every creak made her jump. Ethan sat in the armchair opposite, playing a game on his phone, but his fingers moved mechanically. He too was listening to every sound, ready to react to danger at any moment. "Mom, maybe we should go to Aunt Susan's after all," he asked for the umpteenth time that evening. "No," Jennifer replied firmly. "We're not going to hide." The sound of a window opening was barely audible, but in the tense silence of the house, it sounded like a gunshot. Jennifer looked up sharply, and Ethan froze with the phone in his hands. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Ethan nodded, slowly putting the phone down. They both held their breath, listening. In the kitchen, Thomas Craig stepped cautiously onto the linoleum floor. The room was plunged into semi-darkness, lit only by the faint light from a street lamp. He looked around, the table where the family had breakfast, the refrigerator covered with children's drawings and photographs. The ordinary life of an ordinary family. Rage rose in his chest like a new wave. This woman had lived peacefully all these years while he rotted in prison. She had a home, a son, a job, everything he had taken from him. Craig moved toward the living room, trying not to make a sound. His fingers clenched the handle of a folding knife in his pocket. He wasn't going to kill her, he just wanted to talk. He wanted her to understand what she had done. Jennifer quietly got up from the couch and motioned for Ethan to stay where he was. Her hand found the phone. She could dial 911 with one touch. But first, she had to make sure the threat was real. She walked to the door leading to the hallway and cautiously peeked into the kitchen. A shadow flashed in the dim light. A large male figure was moving through the house. Jennifer's heart skipped a beat. It was him. Thomas Craig was in her house. She quickly returned to Ethan and whispered, "Call the police. Now." Ethan's fingers trembled as he dialed the number, but it was too late. A man appeared in the doorway. Thomas Craig looked older than his 39 years. 8 years in prison had left their mark. Deep wrinkles around his eyes, gray hair, a hard expression on his face. But his eyes were the same, full of rage and pain. "Hello, Jennifer," he said quietly. Jennifer instinctively stood in front of her son, shielding him with her body. Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to speak calmly. "Thomas, you shouldn't have come here." "I shouldn't have?" Craig smiled, but there was no warmth in his smile. "And you should have destroyed families?" He entered the room, and Jennifer stepped back, continuing to shield Ethan. The boy clutched the phone, but didn't dare press the call button, afraid that a sudden movement might provoke Craig. "I was protecting a child," Jennifer said. "Emma needed to be saved." "Save her?" Craig took another step forward. "From what? From the father who loved her? From the father who beat her?" "You're lying!" An explosion of rage made Craig raise his voice. "I would never hurt my girl! Never!" Jennifer saw his hand move toward his pocket. She knew she had to stay calm, keep talking, give Ethan a chance to call for help. "Thomas, I saw the bruises. I saw the x-rays of her broken bones. You didn't deny that you sometimes punished her." "I punished her, yes, like any normal father. But I didn't hit her. I disciplined her, taught her to be a good girl." There was sincere conviction in his voice, and Jennifer realized that all these years he had truly believed he was right. In his mind, he was a victim of the system, not a domestic tyrant. "Where's your wife, Thomas?" she asked gently. "Where's Linda?" Craig's face contorted with pain. "Dead. She died because she couldn't live without her family. Because of you. Because of what you did." He took the knife out of his pocket but held it down, as if he wasn't sure of his intentions. 8 years, he whispered. 8 years I've thought about you every day. Imagined what I would say when we met. "And what do you want to say?" Craig was silent for a few seconds, looking at her with an expression that was a mixture of hatred and confusion. "I want you to understand," he said finally. "To understand what it means to lose everything. What it means when the meaning of your life is taken away from you." Behind him, Ethan finally pressed the call button. He whispered into the phone, "Help, there's a man with a gun in our house, 247 Maple Avenue." Jennifer heard her son's quiet voice and knew help was on the way. She had to keep talking, stall for time. "Your daughter is alive, Thomas," she said. "Emma has grown up. She's studying. She has a loving family. Isn't that what matters?" "She's forgotten me," Craig replied bitterly. "My own daughter has forgotten her father. They poisoned her mind against me. She remembers you, but she also remembers the fear. She remembers the pain." "No!" Craig gripped the knife tighter. "That's a lie! It's all a lie!" In the man's eyes, Jennifer saw what frightened her most. He really didn't understand what he had done to his daughter. In his mind, he was a loving father who had been unjustly deprived of his child. Outside, she heard sirens, at first distant, then closer. Craig heard them too and realized that time was running out. "You called the police again," he said with unexpected calm, hiding behind the law again. "Thomas, it's not too late to stop," Jennifer said. "Turn yourself into the police. Get some help. Maybe someday Emma." "Emma is no longer my daughter," he interrupted her. "I have nothing left. You took everything from me." The sirens grew louder. In a minute, the police would be here. Craig looked at the knife in his hand, then at Jennifer. Something changed in his face. Despair replaced the rage. "I just wanted to talk," he said quietly. "I wanted you to understand." "I understand," Jennifer replied. "I understand that you've suffered. I understand that you lost your family. But that doesn't mean I was wrong." Craig raised his head sharply, and the rage flared in his eyes again. "You weren't wrong? You ruined my life, and you say you weren't wrong?" He took a step forward, raising the knife. Jennifer instinctively stepped back, but tripped over the coffee table and fell. "Thomas, no!" she cried, but it was too late. Craig lunged at her with the knife. The first blow landed on her shoulder, the second on her chest. Jennifer tried to defend herself with her hands, but the man was stronger. "Dad! Dad, stop!" Ethan screamed, but Craig didn't hear him. 8 years of pent-up rage erupted in those few seconds of madness. Jennifer felt her strength leaving her. The pain was unbearable, but worse was the knowledge that she was leaving her son alone. "Ethan," she whispered, "run," but the boy couldn't move, paralyzed by the horror of what was happening. Craig stopped as suddenly as he had started. He looked at the bloody knife in his hand, then at the woman lying in front of him. Reality hit him with full force. "What have I done?" he whispered. "God, what have I done?" Jennifer lay on the floor in a pool of blood. Her breathing was labored, her eyes were closing. She tried to say something to her son, but no words came out. At that moment, the front door burst open. Police officers, led by Detective Coleman and Sheriff Davis, stormed into the house. "Police! Hands up!" Sarah shouted, pointing her gun at Craig. Craig slowly raised his hands, the knife falling from his fingers onto the floor. He didn't resist as the officers wrestled him to the ground and handcuffed him. He just stood there and stared at what he had done. "Call an ambulance!" Davis shouted, kneeling down next to Jennifer. Sarah ran over to Ethan, who was standing in the corner of the room, shaking from shock. "It's over," she said, hugging the boy. "It's over." But for Jennifer Morgan, it really was over. Despite the efforts of the paramedics, they were unable to stop the bleeding. She died on the way to the hospital, never regaining consciousness. Thomas Craig sat in the police car, staring out the window at the house where he had just committed murder. The rage that had sustained him all these years was gone, leaving only emptiness behind. "I didn't mean to," he told Detective Coleman. "I swear, I didn't mean to kill her. I just wanted to talk." Sarah was silent. She had seen too many cases like this to believe in the remorse of murderers. Inside the house, officers photographed the crime scene and collected evidence. Ethan Morgan sat in the ambulance, wrapped in a blanket. His world had fallen apart in a matter of minutes, and he didn't know how to go on. Neighbors gathered on the street despite the late hour. News of the tragedy quickly spread throughout the town. Many were crying. Jennifer was a beloved and respected member of the Maplewood community. Mayor Robert Fisher arrived at the scene and spoke to reporters. "Today our city has lost a wonderful person," he said. Jennifer Morgan dedicated her life to protecting children. She died doing her duty. But these words offered little comfort to those who knew her personally. Thomas Craig spent the rest of the night in a holding cell. He sat on his cot, staring at the wall, trying to understand how it all went wrong. He had planned a conversation, an explanation, maybe an apology from her. Not this. Now Jennifer Morgan was dead, and he was a murderer. Emma would never forgive him. Linda had died for nothing. It was all over. At the hospital, doctors officially pronounced Jennifer Morgan dead at 2:47 a.m. The cause of death was multiple stab wounds to the chest and massive blood loss. Ethan was left an orphan. He had a long road to recovery ahead of him, therapy and attempts to build a new life without his mother. The irony of fate was that now he would need the help of the same child protection system his mother had served. Dawn found Maplewood plunged into mourning. The town, accustomed to peace and quiet, was confronted with the brutal reality of human vengeance and its consequences. Monday, October 21st, began in Maplewood with flags at half-mast on the town hall and schools. The news of Jennifer Morgan's death spread far beyond the small town. Local TV stations covered the tragedy as a symbol of the dangers faced by social workers across the country. Detective Sarah Coleman had been up all night finishing the case file. She sat in her office typing her report, unable to get Jennifer's last words out of her head. Ethan, run. The woman had been thinking about her son even as she died. Thomas Craig spent the night in his cell, staring at the ceiling. In the morning, he was visited by his court-appointed lawyer, a young lawyer named David Hartley, who had only recently been licensed and was not yet accustomed to such serious cases. "Mr. Craig, we need to discuss your defense," Hartley said, opening a folder of documents. "What defense?" Craig didn't even look up. "I killed her. Everyone saw me." "Perhaps we can negotiate a plea bargain in exchange for a reduced sentence. Temporary insanity, emotional distress." "No." Craig finally looked at the lawyer. "I did what I did. No deals." Hartley was puzzled. Most of his clients denied guilt or looked for ways to avoid punishment. Craig was different. He seemed crushed not so much by his arrest as by the realization of what he had done. At Maplewood Hospital, Ethan Morgan was under the supervision of psychiatrist Dr. Elizabeth Chen. The boy had barely spoken since the tragedy, just sitting by the window and staring into space. "Ethan," Dr. Chen said gently, "do you understand what happened?" The boy nodded but did not respond. "Your mother was a very brave woman. She protected children because she believed it was the right thing to do. And now she's dead," Ethan said quietly. "Dead because of her job." Dr. Chen knew that the boy would need long-term therapy to cope with his trauma. He hadn't just lost his mother. He had witnessed her murder, which leaves much deeper scars. By noon, flowers began to arrive at the city park. An impromptu memorial for Jennifer Morgan grew by the hour. Wreaths from colleagues, children's drawings from families she had helped, candles from neighbors. One of the signs read, "Thank you for protecting us when we couldn't protect ourselves." Emma Craig, upon hearing about the tragedy on the news, asked her adoptive parents to take her to Maplewood. The 16-year-old girl stood in front of the memorial, crying and holding a bouquet of white roses. "It's my fault," she told her adoptive mother, Carol Wilson. "If I hadn't been such a bad daughter, Dad wouldn't be in prison. Miss Morgan would be alive." "No, honey," Carol hugged her. "It's not your fault. You were a child who needed protection." But Emma couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. In her child's mind, she was convinced that if she had been better, more obedient, more patient, her family would still be together. On Tuesday, the first hearing in the Thomas Craig case took place. The courtroom was packed with journalists, townspeople, and Jennifer's colleagues from social services. Judge Margaret Harris, the same judge who had decided to remove Emma from her family 8 years ago, presided over the proceedings with visible tension. "Thomas Craig," she said to the defendant, "you are charged with first-degree murder. How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?" Craig stood up. He had lost a lot of weight in the last few days and looked older and more tired. His lawyer whispered something in his ear, but Craig shook his head. "Guilty," he said clearly. A murmur rose in the courtroom. The judge banged her gavel. "Mr. Craig, do you understand the consequences of your statement?" "Yes, Your Honor. I killed Jennifer Morgan. I am guilty." Attorney Hartley looked confused. Defendants did not usually plead guilty to first-degree murder without attempting to bargain. Sheriff Michael Davis sat in the courtroom and thought about how things could have turned out differently. If they had increased security earlier, if they had forced Jennifer to leave town, if too many ifs for one man. After the hearing, the prison chaplain, Father Patrick O'Connor, came to Craig's cell. He was an elderly Irishman who had served in correctional facilities for 30 years and had seen all types of criminals. "My son," he said, "do you want to talk?" Craig was silent for a long time, then asked, "Father, how can I live with what I've done?" "Remorse is the beginning," replied the priest, "but true remorse means accepting responsibility and trying to make amends." "How can I make amends for murder?" "I don't know. but you can try to understand why it happened and help others avoid the same mistake. On Wednesday, Ethan Morgan was discharged from the hospital. His sister Jennifer's sister, Susan Taylor, who lived in a neighboring state, took him in temporarily. Susan was a teacher, married, with 2 children of her own. She loved her nephew, but she knew it would be difficult for her family to cope with his trauma. "We want you to know that you will always be part of our family," she told Ethan as they packed his things at the house on Maple Avenue. "Your mother would be happy to know that you are safe." Ethan silently folded clothes into a suitcase. Every item in the house reminded him of his mother. Her coffee mug in the kitchen, the stack of work papers on her desk, the photos on the refrigerator. "Aunt Susan," he said finally, "do you think Mom did the right thing back then, 8 years ago?" Susan stopped, holding a photo frame in her hands. "Your mother always did what she thought was right. It wasn't always easy, and not everyone liked it. But she saved children. And now one child is left without a mother because of her decision." Susan sat down next to her nephew. "Ethan, your mother wasn't responsible for Thomas Craig's actions. He made his choice. A bad, terrible choice. But it was his choice." On Thursday, an emergency meeting was held at the County Social Services Department. Richard Stone, the department head, called all employees together to discuss safety measures in the wake of the tragedy. "Jennifer's death is a blow to all of us," he said. "But we can't let fear stop us from doing our jobs. Children still need protection." Maria Sanchez raised her hand. "Richard, maybe we should review our protocols? More counseling with psychologists before removing children, softer approaches with families? And let the children suffer while we consult?" Barbara Nelson, a social worker with 20 years of experience, replied sharply, "Jennifer did what she had to do. Emma Craig is alive and well because of her decision." The debate went on for over an hour. Some staff demanded tighter security measures, others called for a rethink of how they worked with families. Jennifer's death made everyone rethink the risks of their job. On Friday, Thomas Craig wrote a letter. He sat in his cell with a piece of paper and a pen, choosing his words carefully. In the end, he wrote a few simple lines. "Emma, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I'm a monster in your eyes. But I want you to know that I loved you. I always have. I just didn't know how to show it properly. Miss Morgan was right to protect you from me. She was a good person, and I ruined her life because of my rage. I'm sorry. If you can forgive me." Dad. He never sent the letter. He burned it in the sink of his cell and watched the ashes wash away. Jennifer Morgan's funeral was held on Saturday at the Methodist Church in Maplewood. The building couldn't hold everyone who wanted to attend, so the service was broadcast over loudspeakers for those standing outside. Ethan sat in the front row between Aunt Susan and Sheriff Davis. The boy didn't cry. He had run out of tears a few days earlier. He just sat and listened to people talk about his mother. Pastor James Roderick spoke about service and self-sacrifice. Richard Stone spoke about Jennifer's professional dedication. A neighbor, Mrs. Mary Johnson, recalled how Jennifer had helped her when her husband was ill. But the most important words came from an unexpected source. A young woman in a black dress approached the pulpit, Emma Craig. "My name is Emma," she said in a trembling voice. 8 years ago, Miss Morgan saved my life." The church was completely silent. "I was a little girl who was afraid of her own father. Miss Morgan saw my fear and found the courage to act. She knew it wouldn't be easy. She knew that someone would hate her, but she did what was right." Emma wiped away her tears and continued. "Today, I am a healthy, happy girl with a loving family. I have a future I can look forward to, all because of Miss Morgan. She gave her life to protect children. I will remember her forever." After the service, Ethan approached Emma. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For telling the truth. My mom was right." A month later, Thomas Craig was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He did not ask for leniency or try to justify himself. When the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, he stood up and said, "Your Honor, I did a terrible thing. I took the life of a good person because of my anger and stupidity. No punishment will bring Jennifer Morgan back. The only thing I can do is take responsibility for my actions." He turned to the courtroom where Ethan sat with his aunt. "Ethan, I'm sorry if you can forgive me. Your mom was a hero. I was a monster." After the trial, Craig was transferred to a maximum security prison, where he spent the rest of his life. He never tried to contact his daughter again, knowing he had caused her enough pain. 6 months later, the Jennifer Morgan Child Protection Center opened in Maplewood. The building was funded by donations from town residents and government grants. A memorial plaque hung at the entrance, dedicated to the memory of Jennifer Morgan, who gave her life protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Ethan Morgan graduated from high school with honors and enrolled in college to study social work. In his application essay, he wrote, "My mother died doing her job. I want to continue her work, but find ways to do it more safely for everyone involved." Emma Craig became a psychologist, specializing in working with children from troubled families. She never forgot the woman who saved her, and dedicated her career to helping children like her. Maplewood remained a quiet town, but the tragedy changed it forever. People came to appreciate the work of social services more, understanding the price that sometimes has to be paid to protect the most vulnerable members of society. The story of Jennifer Morgan and Thomas Craig serves as a warning about how unresolved conflicts and pent-up anger can lead to tragedy. But it also stands as a testament to the courage of ordinary people who risk their lives every day for others. In the end, Jennifer's life was not defined by her death. It was defined by the children she saved, the families she helped, and the principles she stood for until her last day. Emma Craig was alive, Ethan Morgan had found his way, and the Jennifer Morgan Center continued her work. That was her true memorial, not marble and bronze, but the living people who were better for her courage.